Good evening, brothers. My name is Kevin Scott. I'm the historian for the Chicago Alumni Chapter and the North Central Province. Today we're in the home of past Chicago Alumni Chapter Polemarch, Ronald Samuels. Good evening, Brother Samuels.
Good evening, brother.
I'm glad you welcomed us into your home, and we're also here with past North Central Province Polemarch and current Chicago Alumni Polemarch, Michael Hughes, who's working the camera for us this evening.
Well, the camera's working him.
That's more like it.
So, Brother Samuels, we're here this evening because this is one part of a video interview that we're doing of as many of the Chicago Alumni Chapter past Polemarchs that I can make my way around to their homes to provide brothers who will see this interview later a glimpse into your life in Kappa. And
right.
we really appreciate you taking out the time to allow us to ask you a few questions this evening and give us your insight.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So just a few questions. I think that these questions are harmless, and I think you know all the answers, so it's not a test. So, brother, first thing we'd like to know is, what sorts of things would you share about just your family life?
Well,
that you would like for brothers to know?
I'm married, have 4 children. The Lord has blessed me with a wife who enjoys education and was her skills were in art and in science and in library science. She got degrees all over the place. And my children, one is a editor, associate editor of Ebony magazine. One is head of the foundation. What's the name of the foundation? She killed me. I have one who is in Baltimore, and she's in banking. And I have a son who's here, who's an artist.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Tell us where you attended school.
I attended school first in high school, Morgan Park High School. Secondly, Chicago Teachers College, which later became Chicago State. I attended at Roosevelt University, and I attended at John Marshall Law School.
Okay. All right. At that time, speaking about when you were an undergraduate, what would you say was the racial percentage of students at your school?
At which school?
At for undergraduate at Chicago Teachers College.
The ratio of minorities or persons of color would be 1 as to 8. That would be 8 white persons for every 1 person of color.
And based on that dynamic at the school, what would you say was how that dynamic of the percentage of white to black, how did that affect you in school, and how was the school in any way allowance for blacks at the school? What did they do for them positively and or negatively?
Well, they gave them an education. I went to a land grant school. The Chicago Teachers College used to be called Chicago Normal College, and it was designed to be a land grant school so that the teachers would be made available to teach in the city of Chicago.
Okay. All right. And currently, we know that Chicago State University, the undergraduate chapter there is Theta Zeta chapter. And this is definitely long before Theta Zeta came into existence. Can you tell us what chapter were you initiated in while you were at that school?
I was initiated in the Iota chapter. Iota chapter consisted of 5 schools, Loyola, University of Chicago, Chicago Teachers College, which became Chicago State. I forgot the other colleges.
Was Roosevelt included within that?
No, Roosevelt was Alpha Rho.
It was part of Alpha Rho. Okay. All right. And what year were you initiated?
1961.
Okay. You want to give us the whole date?
February 18th, 1961.
All right. And it's different for different brothers depending on what time frame they came across. Could you tell us if when you were initiated, if your line had a line name and what that was?
Yes. The line name was Magnificent Seven.
Okay. Your line brothers that were on your line, are any of them still with us today?
All of them are still with us today.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they're coming by after we finish today.
Okay, that's great. That's great because that answered my next question, which I was going to ask you. Do you still converse with them? And
Definitely.
Okay, that's
Definitely.
great. Could you tell me about, on the subject of your line brothers, how many of them achieved a prominent office within the fraternity and or in their professional lives?
Everybody achieved significantly. Phil Jones was a line member. He was vice president of the University of what's immediately west of us. Boy, I can't. This is vice president at University of Iowa.
Okay.
Charles Mingo was a assistant superintendent of schools in Chicago. Jerome Presley was a principal here in Chicago. William Keyes worked in the railroad. He's always worked in the railroad. Carl Boyd is a motivational speaker. Bob Johnson is retired now, but he was what they call these people who program the air lanes and stuff. He worked for American Airlines, and he used to program the flights.
Okay.
What flights were necessary and where should they go, and when an area was ready for a flight pattern.
Okay. Okay. Did any of them happen to achieve any prominent offices in the fraternity?
Let's see. No, I don't think so.
Okay. So let me ask you this. During that time frame that you were online with Iota Chapter, how would you define initiation as it occurred as you entered the fraternity?
Initiation was a ceremony confirming that you were a Kappa man. You had to appreciate scholarship, you had to appreciate fellowship, and the initiation was just a confirmation. It was just a ceremony that the Kappas recognized that you could be one of their fellows, and to all of the other world that you were a gentleman and a scholar and a lover of good life.
Okay. And in that same respect, the time frame while you were pledging Kappa Alpha Psi, one of the things that many people state it provided them was a different way to look at different struggles and a way to be able to get beyond that. Did you feel as though your time bonding with some of your line brothers and also bonding with the brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi provided that to you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That's an understatement, because when I pledged, we were immersed in Kappa Alpha Psi, and it was a good immersion.
Okay. All right. And so what I want to ask you, did you happen to encounter difficult struggles in your life as a young professional following undergraduate?
Well, yes.
Could you tell us about some of those things that you may recall?
Well, that was prejudice was accepted as a part of your education. And like when I went to law school, it's 300 in the class, and when I started, there were 12 people of color in the class, and when we finished, it was two out of 400, 350, something like that.
Okay. So I understand that you became an attorney. Could you tell me specifically what types of law have you practiced throughout the years?
I practiced trial law. I was a pretty good trial lawyer, and that means you might try anything, but it is whether or not you could make a decent presentation before a judge and or a jury that determined what you could do. My abilities were in communication. I could talk to a jury, I could talk to a judge and make them feel that they could understand my client and my client's motivations.
Okay. All right. Could you tell us how much of a role did Kappa play in preparing you to be a leader in your professional life?
The impact of being a Kappa and developing as a lawyer was significant. Judge Parsons, the first black judge of this country, was a member of the profession as well as Chicago alumni. Judge Layton was a Kappa and a excellent lawyer, and he wasn't born in the United States, but he came to settle in Chicago. He was an excellent lawyer and used to talk about the bond and the members, persons who made up the bond. Ellis Reed was an excellent lawyer, president of the Bar Association, and Polemarch, Kappa Alpha Psi. Just about everyone I talked to.
Earl B. Dickerson.
Earl B. Dickerson. He was more of a businessman, a philanthropist, and a thinker. Everyone I touched gave me some insight and some strength to be a lawyer.
Okay. Now, going back just a little bit before you actually became a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, could you tell us who or what inspired you to become a member of Kappa Alpha Psi?
I didn't know what a fraternity was till I went to college.
Okay.
And the persons who inspired me to be a good student and a good member of Kappa Alpha Psi was two. Bob Brazil and Major Armstead. Most of the folks who see this will know who Bob Brazil and Major Armstead are.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fantastic. Tell me about how the experiences as a Kappa in those days has changed, or what you've seen change throughout the years.
Well, you're assuming there has been a change. The culture has changed. The being a Kappa has changed. Being a Kappa was the stamp of approval of the society, because didn't a lot of people get to be Kappas. A lot of start out and a few would finish. So it was a rigorous discipline, intellectually, emotionally. You had to do some good for the community. And it came out in different people, different ways.
Okay. And in your opinion, when you stated many came out for Kappa, but several of those individuals were not chosen to become part of the bond, what do you attribute that to in terms of the selection process, the rigorous selection process of the persons who were ultimately chosen?
Well, they turned out, at least in my line and the lines before me, which I know pretty well, you had to be vigorous in your academics. My line, which is called Magnificent Seven, when we graduated, or when we became members of the fraternity, all of us but one were on the dean's list, which is pretty difficult considering how difficult it was, how much time it took. We each followed our areas of expertise and developed them to a professional level. One of the things that made me a good Kappa, I think, is how rigorous it was to be a Kappa. You know, you didn't have time for a lot of mess. And as an example of that, in those days, it was not unusual for a person in this area to spend a year and a quarter, a year and a third pledging. We passed 2 lines when we pledged. That was the first line, and there was about 27 guys in that line. There was the next line, and there was about 14 guys in that line, and there was our line, which it was 7. We became members of Kappa in about 7 months, which was unheard of in those days because of the amount of material and men you had to learn and the history of the fraternity you had to learn. It was phenomenal. And everybody just marveled at us because we decided that we was going to make Kappa and it wasn't going to take us our whole undergraduate training period. So we became members of the Brotherhood in 7 months. Wow. So we were sophomores. They wouldn't let you pledge the first year in college in those days. So we became members 7 months. That was quite an achievement of which I'm still proud.
It is something to be proud of. Let me ask you that what prompted you to eventually run for the office of Polemarch in the Chicago Alumni Chapter?
What prompted me?
Yes.
I was keeper of records for a couple of years. I was treasurer for a couple of years. What prompted me is that I wanted to serve my fraternity in some meaningful capacity.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fantastic. And what is your opinion of the pledge program as you know of it, that you went through it, versus what you may know of the current system that we have in place now with the membership intake program?
The pledge system became outdated because the men in the fraternity were not as mature as the men in the fraternity had been in the past. The hazing, the paddling, and stuff like that grew to an excess. And in Greek land, two of the fraternities, it was only four at that time, two of the fraternities had to close down because they were too excessive in their training rigors. We went to a more mature matriculation of pledges into the fraternity by requiring them to know more and to do more. The old days produced a lot of camaraderie, good old Kappa spirit, but there wasn't that many of us. See, there was 5 times as many alphas and omegas as there was Kappas. And Phi Beta Sigma was about the same size as Kappa, except we did a lot more. We did a lot more and better. Everything we did was first class.
Okay. And speaking of first class, what is your recollection of any of our founders that you may have met during your time frame that you've been in the bond?
The recollection that I had was that all of the founders were extremely bright. I met them as they were beginning old age and stuff like that, the ones that I met. They were extremely bright. But they started and they matured as older men. There wasn't a one, perhaps Earl B. Dickerson. He was at Beta, of course, and he wasn't one of the founders. But these men were older, more settled in their ways. They were brilliant, and they were hardworking. You would be really impressed, as I was, with these men who were older, who had such a zeal for life and for fraternity.
Did you ever have an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with any of them?
Oh, yes. Edward G. Irvin. Oh, yeah, because he lived here in this city, and his health was good. So we often had conversations, the whole chapter, for over 30 years. And he was just brilliant. And when I say brilliant, you know, I'm a pretty smart fellow myself. But he was absolutely brilliant. And they always called Earl B. Dickerson the 11th founder because he was at the University of Illinois. But there was not enough persons who were eligible from Illinois. And he caught hell, and he told us about how he caught hell, but he kept pushing, and it was a wonderful experience.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Kappa brother, or whom out of Kappa would you say that you admire the most, who's either living or dead?
There's 10 of them.
Okay.
They used to hang around Bloomington, Indiana. They all were great guys. They all worked hard. They all would pique your imagination, and and stroke you to become a better man and a better Christian and a better whatever you was, because they were mature. They were older than the normal college age persons, and it's because they had to work. They had to work and go to school and build a fraternity. That was great.
Okay. So tell us how you would describe an ideal Kappa in your perspective.
Well, just look at me. I'm an ideal Kappa.
Okay. All right. What are some of your fondest memories since you have been a member of Kappa Alpha Psi?
In my first year as an initiate, we were able to go to the 50th anniversary of Kappa Alpha Psi at Bloomington, Indiana, and what do you do when you have a house? We moved into the house. We provided young men with the opportunity to live in a fraternity house. That was one of my fondest memories, my greatest memory. It was just fun. It was good to be a part of a fraternity that believed in excellence and in performance.
Okay. What type of role do you believe senior Kappas should play in a fraternity?
Less of a role.
Could you explain that? What do you mean by that?
A fraternity is a gathering of college men. Alumni chapters can help the undergraduates, but what good things, what errors, or whatever should be those of the undergraduate. I was able to develop because we were able to develop as undergraduates, as young men. When I joined the fraternity, I was 19 years old, and we had to make decisions and things like that that were adult decisions. And the undergraduates now are not given the same authority to get things done.
Okay.
Mistakes and good things, they belong to the undergraduate.
All right. So with that said, because there was, at the very least, one of our founders who really believed the same thing that you said, because he was, Diggs was opposed to the creation of the alumni chapters, and he felt that it should solely be remain undergraduate, and that of course our undergraduates are our focus. They're our future in the fraternity. So speaking of the founders and their opinions and such, do you believe that we as a fraternity are carrying out the vision of the founders?
No, I don't. And thank God we don't carry out the vision of the founders, because we must move onward and upward. The founders were marvelous men, but they wasn't the end of Kappa. Kappa has to continue to grow, to develop, to build young men who can lead this nation. And they were great for 1911. But now, this is 2011, they were just beginning. It's like a seed, the big oak tree, oak. And it take an oak tree 100 years to grow. Mm-hmm. And then it puts out some more, what they call them little things?
Acorns.
Acorns. Mm-hmm. And Kappa is like an acorn. We must grow. We must serve the community. We must be examples to the young men and women in our community for them to grow and to be fine producers of a marvelous community.
Okay. Well, you spoke about how Kappa basically has to continue to be relevant in today's times, because the issues that faced Kappa in 1911 are not the issues that solely face us today, is what I got from your last statement. So based on that, can you tell me what are some of the pros and cons that you believe that affect our fraternity, or even in our chapter, Chicago Alumni Chapter, that you feel some things need to be to change?
I don't know if need to change is the appropriate level of discussion.
Okay.
We can always do better, and we must do better. We are, for the most part, men of color who are developing. Now, I say for the most part because we got a number of brothers who are white. And they participate and develop just along with the rest of the brothers. So I don't know if we need to change, but if one is going to do better, they must do more, and they must understand what they're doing, and they must understand that each Kappa in this world is a shining light to some young man who wants to do better, wants to do well, and believes in excellence.
Okay. So, in terms of the pros and cons of the fraternity, can you think of maybe one or two things that you think that the fraternity is definitely headed in the right direction, or a couple of things that you think maybe we ought not to follow down a certain path?
I think the Guide Right program is one of the best programs the Kappa Alpha Psi has. And the Guide Right program doesn't even deal with Kappa. It deals with young men who would like to make something of themselves, and for the most part, they like to associate with the men of Kappa. And the Guide Right program has been a good program as it has developed over the years since I've been aware of it.
Okay. All right, so that's a pro. Do you have any cons?
No, ain't no cons in Kappa.
Okay.
No. You better go interview Omega or something. You looking for cons, because I haven't seen none.
Okay.
No, because it is a vigorous undertaking amongst vigorous men, intellectually capable men. It's just a good mix.
Okay. All right. So, based on all that positivity that you have, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of Kappa Alpha Psi?
The next black president be a Kappa.
Okay.
And that the next black president be here in 4 or 5 years, not another 100 years or 150 years. I look forward to that, because you must have discipline to be leader of this country. You must have appreciation of moral values, Christian values. You know, and you can't be no dummy. So there's a whole lot of people that applied to Kappa that never made it. They were good men and all of that, but they didn't have the discipline to work through it. They didn't have the discipline. Sometimes it became unpleasant. Didn't have the discipline to see beyond the immediate little minor stuff to the greater good that Kappa would do for the whole nation.
Okay. So, if you had an option for Grand Chapter to seriously ask your opinion about some issues that are within our fraternity that you would like to have Grand Chapter to address for the future of the fraternity, what would you say at least one thing would be?
The Grand Polemarch should always be an undergraduate. it is important that we don't forget that these are young men in training, and that the best place for them to train is in leadership positions, and that alumni membership can come up with some checks and donations, but you can't lead if you're not allowed. You can't become a good leader unless you are allowed to lead. There will be mistakes. That's the nature of growing up. But fundamentally, we got a great start when the 10 founders put all of this Kappa stuff together. They didn't put it all together. We grew over the years. But I believe that the young men have the wherewithal to lead this country and to lead our fraternity into greater and better excellence.
Okay. All right. That concludes the questions that I have on this sheet that I had prepared for you. I wanted to find out from you at this stage, is there anything, while we're recording this for posterity, that you would like to say, something that I did not ask you, that you want to make sure that if someone that sees this later on would like to hear, you'd want to hear from you?
Well, it's the one thing we don't talk about much anymore, and that's excellence. That's brotherhood. We don't have to be the largest fraternity. We don't have to be the richest fraternity, but we have to be the best. And we must spend some time relating to the issue of what is the Kappa spirit. There is something in Kappas that transcends the history, that transcends the camaraderie, that transcends the excellence. There is a Kappa spirit. It's a good old Kappa spirit. I experienced it myself. I still experience it. But we have to stay with what Kappa really is. Kappa is not, and I don't think it's meant to be the largest fraternity. It's meant to be the best fraternity.
Okay. All right. I agree with that. Thank you so much for your time, brother.
All right.
All right. Appreciate it.